In every gardening circle, someone eventually brings up the frustration of slow compost. You turn the pile, you water it, you wait, and still it crawls along. Yet, long before modern bins, tumblers and plastic composting gadgets took over backyards, growers and homesteaders used a method so efficient and so reliable that many old-timers quietly kept using it even after commercial composters became popular. They called it a rot tunnel. A simple underground system that doesn't require turning, barely needs maintenance, and produces finished compost dramatically faster than most bins. What makes this method so interesting isn't just that it works, but why it works. It takes advantage of physics, soil biology, and natural heat retention in a way that modern bins can't compete with. Stick with this guide, because by the end you'll know exactly how this old-school technique functions, why it's faster, and how to build one in your own garden without fuss or expense. Now, let's move directly into the practical details. A rot tunnel is essentially a long trench dug into the soil and filled gradually with organic waste. Instead of stacking compost above ground, this method uses the earth itself as insulation, moisture control, and, well, a microbial powerhouse. Soil walls maintain humidity, buffer temperature swings, and introduce a massive population of microorganisms that instantly begin breaking down material. In a traditional bin, microbes have to colonize the pile slowly, and, well, heat escapes easily. Underground, the opposite happens. The decomposition stays hot, steady, and uninterrupted, accelerating the entire process. Gardeners who use this method regularly report fully broken down, soil-ready compost in a fraction of the time. What's happening is simple biology. Soil-dwelling organisms are already adapted to low oxygen environments, varying moisture, and complex organic matter. When you bury kitchen scraps or plant trimmings in a trench, you are dropping them directly into the most biologically active zone of your yard. Building a rot tunnel does not require lumber, pipes, or a kit. The classic frontier and early agricultural method was to dig a trench roughly a foot wide and around 16 inches deep. The length depends on your garden layout. Once the trench is open, organic waste is added in layers. Kitchen scraps, plant trimmings, and partially broken down compost all work. The key is not to fill the trench all at once. Instead, add material as it becomes available and cover each layer with a few inches of soil. This prevents odours, deters animals, and maintains the oxygen balance crucial for fast decomposition. The result is a slow, steady underground worm highway where microbes and invertebrates process waste around the clock. A practical example for modern gardeners is to create a rot tunnel between raised beds or along walking paths. As you fill and cover it, you essentially create a nutrient conveyor line that slowly feeds the surrounding soil. Anyone who has maintained compost knows the biggest enemy of rapid decomposition is, well, temperature fluctuation. Above ground, piles cool down at night and lose heat during rainstorms. Underground, temperatures are more constant, especially once microbial activity starts producing internal heat. The rot tunnel becomes a warm corridor even in cooler seasons. The soil walls also prevent moisture loss. Decomposition requires dampness, and the consistent humidity inside a tunnel keeps microbial life busy even when above-ground piles, tend to dry out. If you want to test this difference, take 2 sets of similar kitchen scraps, add one to your compost bin, and bury the other in a trench. After about 3 weeks, compare them. The buried material will be noticeably further along. Above-ground bins often require gardeners to introduce worms manually, especially if they want vermicomposting. The rot tunnel, though, eliminates this step entirely. Earthworms detect decomposing matter through subtle chemical signals, and, they migrate in naturally. The trench becomes a habitat they prefer, moist, protected, and rich in organic layers they can digest. This is why old farmers called the rot tunnel the silent feeder. It not only produces compost, but actually trains worms to travel along the length of your garden, aerating soil and depositing castings. If you're aiming for soil that stays fertile without constant fertilizer, this method is one of the easiest long-term strategies available. One of the most effective ways to use a rot tunnel is to dig it in the off-season near where you'll plant heavy feeders such as tomatoes, squash corn or cabbage. By the time planting season arrives, the organic matter will have broken down into nutrient-rich humus. Another practical approach is rotating the tunnel's location each year. As you move the trench, you enrich different sections of your garden, resulting in long-term soil improvement rather than isolated pockets of fertility. A well-constructed rot tunnel practically maintains itself. You simply continue adding organics and covering them with soil. There's no turning, no stirring, no balancing green and brown layers, and no need for a perfect carbon-to-nitrogen ratio. Because decomposition happens underground, nature balances these variables on its own. So, over time, the trench will fill as the compost matures. When it reaches ground level, simply start a new trench nearby and plant directly over the old one. You'll immediately see the result when roots hit the enriched soil. If this deep dive into the rot tunnel method gave you a new respect for old-school composting wisdom, be sure to subscribe and share this video with fellow growers, homesteaders and soil lovers. Hydrohaven is here to keep practical, proven techniques alive and in your hands.